we're not going to get into the depths of data science or governance, but we're gonna really zoom out and step back and talk about what's going on in the world. I'm really excited to have Michael here. He spent his entire career in the national security arena, working in the White House, part of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. You're now at Beacon Global Strategies.
Yes.
And you're advising clients on how to navigate the waters of everything that's going on. You're an author of Blinking Red, Crisis and Compromise in American Intelligence After 9/11.
Yes.
And if he looks familiar, it's probably because you've seen him on MSNBC or Bloomberg or CNN or Fox News, pick your poison. But you're on there frequently as a pundit, is that a fair
Yeah, I
term?
guess so.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Yeah. So this is this should be a fun session. We'll get to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world, and we'll talk a little bit about the economy and.
I mean, what are we going to talk about? There's nothing going on in Washington at all.
Well, let's start with the new pope. No.
Okay, I was about to say, Trump's going to claim credit for the new pope, the first American pope. So look out. Watch your Twitter feed. It's going to happen.
So maybe, man, it's been 102 days or something, 105 days. I don't know. I've lost count.
Right.
But it seems like we're in a new, interesting reality of a lot of maybe chaos. Is chaos or change or tumult? I don't know
there's chaos and improvisation. There's a lot disruption.
Yeah. So is this the new normal? Is this what we're gonna?
I think
we have 4 more years of this.
I think Trump is, to contrast 2017 with this year, his first year in office. Trump coming in experienced. Last time around, he was hiring some experts that he felt like he needed to get in the door. This time he feels legitimacy. You know, he won the popular vote. He won the big 7 swing states. He improved his vote count among Hispanic Americans. So it's like a complete victory. I think that helps explain a little bit of the despondency within the Democratic Party. And it's part of why Trump is sort of a man in full right now. He feels the legitimacy. He feels like he knows what to do. He's making every decision. The Democrats are still in a bit of disarray. And Trump feels like, you know what, I can do this, and I'm enjoying myself, and so I'm going to make sure my cabinet nominees are, predominantly loyal, and I'm going to really emphasize disruption. And I think that sort of characterizes what's going on here. Remember last time Trump was dealing with firing the FBI director in a Russia investigation. He felt under siege. He wasn't sure what to do. This time he feels like he knows what to do, and he's moving out.
And built a team to execute on that, not just.
He's built a big team, some familiar names, some unfamiliar names. You know, it's an interesting phenomenon. He's not really hiring that many people from his first term, which I don't know that a lot of people have totally digested yet. It's almost as if he's repudiating his first term, at least personnel-wise. He's hiring people that he believes are more loyal and more committed to the MAGA movement, because I think he still has this suspicion, looking back at some of the personnel from the first term, that, they were either the deep state or George Bush neocons or, whatever, something like that. So he's, I think they are very carefully vetting every potential nominee and making sure that the loyalty box is checked first.
Yeah. So maybe stack up for us everything that's going on in this America First set of changes and agenda that's going on. Or is it an agenda, or is it just a set of actions?
Well, I mean, first let me just mention, and I know all of you are experiencing this out in the workplace, but this is one of the most uncertain economic times in a long period. So first, of course, it's the tariff war, the trade war. That in and of itself would be incredibly disruptive, but then think of every nation in the world figuring out how they're going to react to Trump's trade war. And that's on top of this phenomenon, this trend of rewiring the global trading system, where deglobalization is falling apart, free trade agreements are increasingly under scrutiny. Meanwhile, we're rewriting the entire tax code. That's what Congress is doing, and they have been doing, and they hope to pass something by August. The Federal Reserve is under a great deal of pressure. We are in an incredibly innovative time in terms of technology with artificial intelligence, of course. affecting, robotics also affecting the personnel and autonomy and all these other issues that are very important. So there's just so many things before you even get to the raw geopolitics of it all. And then if you think of the three most important theaters of the world, and I'm about to add a fourth, but we have a hot war in Europe. We have half of a hot war in the Middle East, but it could go back to a hot war again at any time. We have a very tense Asia, where the Chinese are not just harassing Taiwan, but also the Philippines. And now we have India and Pakistan trading blows. I think they understand the importance of dialing that down so that a full-blown war won't occur. But you know, this has got people nervous that in four theaters of the world, we have very severe geopolitical tensions. And that's still among this volatile period of populism, which I think has been around since at least, it's always been around in America, but especially the case since the '08 financial crisis. The immigration northward, I think, has affected Europe in addition to, obviously, the United States. So there's elements of isolationism, a hangover to America's endless wars, maybe some nativism involved, protectionism. So there's a lot of stuff going on as an overhang to this larger deglobalization, post-COVID phenomenon that we're experiencing.
And so, you know, some of that created by external factors and a lot of the tumult created internally. Is that our new normal? Like, are we just, you know, warming up, or was sort of setting the stage and then, you know, we'll calm back down again?
I think it's a feature of President Trump, which is tumult and disruption. I don't want to be negative and say it's disruption for its own sake, but sometimes it does feel rather improvisational when we do a reciprocal tariff on the whole world and then take them all down 6 days later, except for China. So I think there's a lot of lurching going on. You can see it in the stock markets, but you can see it among our allies as well. And so I think the business community has been trying to urge onto the president, hey, we understand you're going to do tariffs and we're not going to criticize them, but if you could maybe make clear exactly why you're seeking these tariffs in the first place and what you hope to achieve from them, we can kind of price that in, if you will. I think the president has told them, he's said it privately and now it's out in the public sphere, he's okay to take a stock market hit for some period of time. He's all right with if there's a little bit of negative economic growth, because he feels like, in his words, he sees a beautiful picture at the end of the rainbow. And so he thinks he's getting us to a place. Now, I don't know that you wanted to start a trade war, but he has created space for all sorts of new bilateral trade agreements. I don't know if we're going to call them FTAs, free trade agreements right now, but we had the first one finally today with the United Kingdom. Everyone in Washington has been telling all of our clients, because that's what we've been hearing from the administration, that we were going to have Japan and Korea for the last 3 to 4 weeks. India is in the mix. Israel, finally, they did one. They did the United Kingdom. I think that is going to be to the immense relief of the markets, but also companies, allies, and everywhere around the world. And so maybe we can begin to depressurize some of this tariff war. And Trump may have created some space for us to really get some concessions out of some of our allies around the world. There's still lots to criticize, like, should you have done this? Should you have signed them up and then just gone up against China as a united front, since China's the real problem, it's the mercantilist economy. But this is the path he's chosen, and maybe he's created space for economic growth in the future through additional markets and fewer non-tariff barriers.
And so what's your take on, I think there's some doomerism around the dollar no longer being the reserve currency and head in that direction. Sounds like you maybe have more of a middle ground on that.
Yeah. Well, I think, let me just say this. A lot of people say a lot of things about Donald Trump. He gets that the U.S. dollar is the U.S. as the world's reserve currency is very, very important. I mean, nearly almost existential when you get up in the way Donald Trump thinks about things. He tweets about a lot. He posts on X about a lot. But he really gets irritated if there's any suggestion whatsoever that people like China are going to build an alternative payment systems. And so I think at the end of the day, now he also supposedly is against sanctions because I think it's filtered up to him that the U.S. overuses sanctions, which causes our adversaries to develop alternative financial systems. He claims that's one of the reasons he's not down with a broad application of sanctions like many others in Washington are. And he prefers tariffs. Of course, that's got its own pitfalls. But I think he really cares about this, and he really is going to listen to people on this particular score. Now, if you're talking about the so-called Mar-a-Lago Accords, where we were going to, decrease the value of the dollar to increase American trade overseas, to bring down the trade deficit, that was his top economist's theory before he took office, but a lot of people have poured cold water all over this idea of some big accord where we browbeat our allies like we did in the 80s with Japan to accept a lower dollar value relative to their own currency. So I think that's going away.
Good. So our Fed Reserve colleagues in the audience, happy
where
job
are
for
they?
now.
Where are they?
Good fun. Yeah, keep going. So let's shift a little bit to geopolitics.
Okay.
You brought that up. Maybe start a couple of questions, but maybe just start give us what's going on in the world. These 4 big conflicts,
Theaters,
boiling conflicts, maybe start there with.
Yeah, so y'all get it. I mean, we won the Cold War, and we had this unipower moment. At the time, I was going through high school and college, where we were, as the French called us, the hyperpower. We were able to do the Persian Gulf War effortlessly and win big time. And that lasted, I think, at least until September 11th, 2001. And we went to this 20-year phase of the global war on terrorism, and we did 2 sort of Middle Eastern wars in the middle of it. But what's happened is we went through the global war on terrorism is that we realized that we were now in a new age of great power competition, great power adversaries, Russia and China. Now, they have a lot in common, and we can get into all that. And Russia's economy is nothing like America's and and China's, but they're still a serious adversary. They still want to dictate security terms in Europe. They obviously are invading their allies and have been even long before Ukraine. So it's something for us to watch. But I would say that the organizing principle in Washington, D.C. is still the competition with China. It sets even though we talk about Ukraine all the time in the Middle East, and we are involved there, and sort of Reagan Republicans like me don't want to be isolationist. We don't want to at least I don't want to just focus on Asia. I think the U.S. has a positive role to play elsewhere in the world as well. But I think that the global competition with China is preeminent in everyone's mind, and it's becoming the dominant organizational feature. There's a new China committee in Congress. There's literally at Beacon, I mean, my firm is a national security foreign affairs advisory firm. And by the way, I meant to start with saying thank you for the invitation, and we love our association with you. We're tracking maybe 150 different little China initiatives across the executive branch, some in the Congress, everything from export controls to limiting U.S. outbound investment into China, to remember what kind of investments the Chinese are making in the United States. So this is what everyone's focused on, and we're feeling like we're behind. We don't feel like our military is growing at a sufficient pace to keep up with the rising Chinese military. We have severe defense industrial base problems that are a hangover from what I mentioned, which was the end of the Cold War, when we gave ourselves a dividend, a holiday from history, because we were the hyperpower. We let a lot of our defense industrial base atrophy. The Chinese are cranking out ships. They're catching up with us almost in every possible way, except for maybe submarines and a few other technological items that I bet we'll get into in a minute. So I think that for all you see out there, and you definitely see Trump's focus on the economic part of China, but I think across Washington, and we can get into what Trump's China security policy is, we know what his economic policy is, and we know how much these are linked. And so I think that is what you're going to continue to see more and more of going forward, even as the Middle East and Ukraine still grab a lot of headlines because we're more familiar with those places and we've traveled there and we all studied World War II and know about Israel, et cetera.
The through line of those 130, 150 initiatives, the through line of extreme tariffs, the through line of export controls, are we already in a soft conflict with China in a new sort of way that's percolating?
I think we're in a Cold War. I mean, there's a lot, every academic sort of foreign affairs person is weighing in on this. It's not like the Cold War with the Soviet Union where they had virtually no economy. This is, and I don't need to tell this audience, the tech audience, but now more than ever, the technology of the future is in the private sector. It's not as much dependent on U.S. government funding. It's more about the U.S. government trying to learn as much as it can about AI, robotics, quantum, et cetera, so that robotics again, did I say that? And then make sure everybody is, we're catching up. A lot of people in Washington read this report from ASPI, the Australian Security Policy Institute, where they rank where does the United States stand vis-a-vis China. And it makes us very uncomfortable to read that we're behind in many aspects as it pertains to artificial intelligence. So I do think we're in a bit of a soft Cold War with them, not like the one with the Soviet Union. We're in some state of, the Biden folks in Europe call it de-risking. I think Trump is more firmly in a decoupling category, even though a lot of people say, my God, our economies are interdependent. Do you all know what you're talking about? Well, you don't know how intertwined our supply chains are. But I do think that's the through line, which is like, we've got to, protect ourselves, learn the lessons from COVID about our supply chain, decouple from China, and begin to challenge them and get our act together so that we can challenge them, because we feel like China, in league with Russia, increasingly Iran and North Korea, wants to change the playbook of the world. And for as much as it looks like the United States is stepping back from its leadership role right now and doesn't seem to appreciate our alliances as much as some would say, we're still a force for good in the world, and we still don't want China to take Taiwan, China to dominate the South China Sea, where all the economics of the world go through, and then later assert themselves globally and lead to a decrease in American security, prosperity, and freedom.
Yeah. Maybe let's shift to AI a little bit.
Okay.
So I have an observation. You can disagree with it, but this audience has been dealing with AI for 5 years, 10 years, something like that, and it's always sort of been it's always been something that was in enterprises that was kind of wonkish and nerdy that people were building their businesses on top of. And with some of the new generative AI and some of the new geopolitical conflicts and some of the advance of China, suddenly it has been propelled into diplomacy and defense and, both weapon systems, but also soft power. Mm-hmm. And so, I think for everybody in this room, probably, we're now working on something that is at the, the entire global perspective suddenly.
Right.
And so maybe let's talk a little bit about that. We're doing some export controls. We've just got a new AI diffusion.
AI diffusion rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I'm not really I'm sort of a policy person. I'm not really a technologist or anything. I try to learn and be basically coherent in some of these topics that you all are experts in.
I'll fill in.
But once AI fused with what I love, which is geopolitics, I realized that this is the most exciting new geopolitical issue in a long, long time. And essentially, we've seen these trends for years, and I like talking about the Middle East a little bit, where we all know Mohammed bin Salman will be the ruler for another 40 years, in addition to however long he's been in office today. He has a Vision 2030. He knows he needs to diversify the Saudi economy over time, use their wealth to invest all over the world, but particularly in the United States, into a broad range of technologies. UAE, more or less in the same place, Qatar at some degree as well. And they finally found what they wanted to principally invest in. The foundation of their new diversified economies is artificial intelligence. They read all of our articles and policy papers in the United States that we do not have enough energy to propel some of these issues, some of these data centers like we need to. They've gotten the message to Washington in the last 2 to 3 years that, of course, hey, don't forget about us. But then that awakens, all right, fine, if we need to do this in the Middle East, because you have lots of energy, a lot of people are starting to say, but how are you going to deal with cooling and water? But we'll lay that aside for a second. If you've got all of this ability for us to be able to do data centers in the Middle East, which we absolutely need to be able to do, you all understand it better, to train the algorithms so that we can beat China, which is the way people in Washington always think about it. I know you're thinking about it from a different perspective. But then we think, okay, they want these data centers. Donald Trump wants more investment in the United States. Trump's first trip abroad, planned trip abroad, the Pope funeral doesn't count, is to the Middle East. And it's not to our traditional geopolitical places like Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. It's to Qatar, UAE, and Saudi. This is a total acknowledgement of the importance of the investment that these countries make, and they want, in exchange for as much as $1 trillion investment in the U.S. economy, us to permit them to receive semiconductor chips which are capable of running and increasing the compute power in data centers so that their own population can use the application of AI. I think what they're saying to us is, you don't need to teach us how to create semiconductors. We don't need to know your secret sauce with what you all are doing, but we want you all to relax your export control rules so that we can have these chips, we can put them in the Middle East, and we can train our people to use artificial intelligence, because over time, these Gulf states want to be at least proficient in the application of artificial intelligence, because they see that as the future. And so what do we start saying? We start saying, well, UAE, what are you doing with China or Saudi? Like, why don't you cut off all these different things you have going with China? First of all, we just don't want you doing with anything with them anyway, because this is our traditional backyard. And on top of that, if China is too present in your economy, why are we going to ship the crown jewels over in our semiconductors and let them run around and figure out, like, they've already stole trillions of dollars of our intellectual property anyway? There's other geopolitical issues that are brought to bear. You're going to begin to see some of this next week when Trump is in the Middle East. I'm getting reports from some of the folks at my firm that they haven't been able to reach a lot of the agreements that they wanted to. So the AI data center chips part of this may be de-emphasized next week, but it's a big issue and it's fascinating, and we're all watching it really closely where we are, because, you know, Washington sees these things in the terms of the global competition with China, lesser degree Russia, North Korea, and Iran.
Got it. So everybody get your hybrid cloud strategy ready, get your data center in Saudi Arabia, GPU.
I mean, for all of us that have been thinking about, like, how is nuclear energy going to make a comeback? And we've seen 1,000 articles about this for 30 years, and everyone just, at the end of the day, shrugs. It's AI at the end of the day, and now they're reopening 3 Mile Island. I mean, what? Like, whoever thought that would happen? I mean, that's what Microsoft needs to power its data center.
People really love ChatGPT.
Yeah, it really.
Nuclear power. Yeah,
we work for a lot of tech firms that were under massive pressure. They still are in Washington, but, you know, things changed for them with AI, because people suddenly wanted to talk to them about something other than, like, you're getting my child addicted to your algorithm.
So on the other side of the Middle East and the potential deal making there, export controls to China, and maybe related, just geographically more than anything else. We still have an incredibly important bastion in Taiwan for, you know, even though the intellectual property is maybe NVIDIA and US based. Yeah. Certainly the manufacturing is very close to our.
Yeah, so apparently we're still in the lead in terms of, and I know y'all get this better than I do, but just, you know, we're still in the lead in semiconductor design, but we've lost semiconductor manufacturing, which is why the Congress passed this enormous industrial policy piece of legislation 3 years ago, at least now, called the CHIPS Act, to subsidize TSMC and whoever to, you know, Intel, which is another long and complicated story, but for them to begin to rebuild semiconductor manufacturing back here in the United States. And so I think this is acutely on the front of everyone's mind. I think it wasn't just the fear of Taiwan being taken by China that motivated us to pass the CHIPS Act. I think that was part of it. I think it was more coming from a position of, oh my God, we totally lost this. Absolutely critical. I mean, the way I was exposed to it was just because we're national security people and people in the Pentagon are saying, oh my God, look how many weapons systems rely on chips, and oh, we don't make them here. And some are made in Europe, but and some in Japan, but a lot of them are in Taiwan. So it really caused a panicked effort that is still ongoing in Washington to try and figure out how do we repatriate this type of semiconductor manufacturing back here in the United States. This continues to be a big issue in Washington. But I think what you're getting at is that I was already worried about a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, and we can talk about the timelines and the windows and the military advantages that China may or may not have. But if all of this semiconductor manufacturing expertise is in Taiwan, and Taiwan is taken sometime in the next 3 to 5 years by China, by the way, a lot of people say the United States should then bomb some of these semiconductor manufacturing plants to keep the Chinese away from them, which the Taiwan folks do not want to hear us talk about. But it's a big issue.
Maybe I think I've heard you speak about this before, but maybe for the audience, that timeline.
Yes.
I think that's a very interesting backstory that not necessarily everybody hears about.
Oh, sure. All of our financial clients are hedge funds, and they're grilling banks. Everyone's grilling us on this timeline because obviously so much of the world economy goes through the South China Sea. And the reason Taiwan is attractive, not just because of the reasons China claims about it was always our territory and common heritage and a million other things that they cite, but because it's part of the first island chain, and if you're able to possess Taiwan, you can begin to project power outward across the South China Sea, which I mentioned are the sea lanes of the world where so much of the global trade goes, and it's projected all this global trade is only going to increase through there. So everyone is obsessed with staring at China, trying to figure out when is their capability, let's just say military capability, when is that going to be adequate in order to mount a cross-straits invasion? Then there's a second question of just so you have it militarily capable doesn't mean you're going to do it. And so Xi Jinping has to make a big decision. So a lot of people in the press conflate these two issues. A leading U.S. admiral, Admiral Davidson, a few weeks ago said that Xi Jinping's timeline for his military to be ready to start a war, to go across which is no small thing. I mean, the Saving Private Ryan going across the English Channel looks like going across a swimming pool compared to how difficult it will be to mount a cross-straits 100-mile invasion in rougher waters, et cetera, et cetera. But nonetheless, he said the military could possibly be ready to do it by 2027. So everyone was like, oh my God, does that mean there's going to be war in 2027? No, I mean, people that parse this out, the CIA, outside experts think it might be at the beginning of a new Xi Jinping term. So what are we, in year 2 of his second 5-year term? So he would presumably want to get into another one, probably needs to fix his economy this term. But, if the base case is they're going to invade and probably succeed unless the United States gets its act together militarily and alliance-wise in Asia, then we've got a big problem on our hands in 3 to 5 to 6 years. So everyone just basically says that the late 2020s to early 2030s, like, look out, watch. And all of their hedge funds and others are trying to figure out how to game all this out, and it makes my head hurt.
A side question on that, mostly my own curiosity on this one.
Yeah.
The Chinese economy has had stumbles in the past couple of years, especially with their real estate and debt and all of that. Does that if that's economic situation is more pervasive and long term, does that put more pressure on Xi to invade sooner, or is it kind of an independent variable? It's mostly military readiness and.
I think you're right on this variable. I mean, there's another variable which we're getting quizzed about a lot, which is this gets to what Donald Trump has said about whether the United States will defend Taiwan. for all Biden's faults, at least 4 times, he said, much to the chagrin of his staff, yes, the U.S. military is going to back Taiwan in the event of a military invasion. Trump hasn't said that. Trump was asked about it, and he's like, well, they owe us money. They stole our semiconductor manufacturing plans. We're like their insurance company. They better spend more. They better do more. So people are starting to say, wow, was this an independent variable? If Trump isn't going to speak the language of deterrence, which every American president does, which is, by God, whether we do it or not is a totally separate question, but you want to say that you're going to do it to plant some doubt in Xi Jinping's mind about whether it's a good idea for him to potentially risk war with the United States by mounting this. So that's another variable. Like, where is Trump on this? Where's the Chinese economy? Does that make them want to go earlier while Trump is president because they think Trump is going to be like, I'm not going to war over Taiwan. Are you crazy?
We need some of that tariff energy on this.
I know.
On this defense side.
Well, that's what the China hawks are all saying. Like, what is the broader U.S.-China policy? We know what the economic and trade policy is. It's 145% tariffs, at least for now. And, they're going to Switzerland this weekend to start to talk about things. But we don't know really where he is on some of these bigger issues and alliance management. And does he want to do the alliance management with the Philippines, Japan, and Korea?
Yep.
I mean, I don't subscribe to this Trump wants to be an authoritarian, et cetera, et cetera. But, I mean, he respects the great powers. And so he's interested in having good relationships with Russia and China. I think that's just instinctively who Trump is. And so, what kind of signals, these are variables, this is why I got on this tangent, sorry, but these are variables that people are weighing to say, well, does this make it more likely that an invasion would occur before Xi Jinping's 4th term or after?
So let's suppose for a second that it is later, as you first said.
Thank
you. You brought up defense industrial base before.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that, timing-wise, that puts sort of this current administration in a position to do all the preparing for potential inevitable conflict, for the next administration. What does that look like? And are we on a path to getting prepared? Or are we on a path to fix the defense industrial base?
I don't think we're on an irreversible path yet.
Okay.
There's a congressional commission that gets together every 5 years and weighs in on U.S. strategic grand strategy with a particular emphasis on U.S. military capability. And they reported last summer that this is not a hysterical group of people who were like freaking out all the time. I mean, they're a sober-minded group. And when, we just went over all the theaters where there was major trouble, Russia and the Chinese are enough, that we're in the most dangerous, the United States, are in the most dangerous situation since World War II. With China building, Russia on the march, Iran is sort of on its back foot now, but nonetheless, they're on the threshold of a nuclear weapon. Now India and Pakistan are flexing. And they're begging for military spending on par with what the United States did during the Cold War. So, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think the lowest we were ever at was 3.7, but at different times in the Reagan buildup, we were stronger. And we're like 2.7 now. The Congress is trying to put in an extra $150 billion into this gigantic tax bill, which maybe gets us to $1 trillion a year, but the Chinese are just more efficient and brutal and cranking out ships. We could throw $10 billion in our Navy right now, and they couldn't spend it. We don't have enough shipyards. We don't have enough welders. I mean, this is such a massive problem. So I think we're really far behind on the rebuild of our defense industrial base. You know what did us a favor was the Russia-Ukraine, because all of a sudden we realized once we started shipping munitions over to the Ukrainians, like, oh my God, the warehouse is empty now. Like, this is ridiculous. And then we started looking at some of the missiles, and people in my home state of Alabama, these people had to sew parts of the fuses onto some of these missiles. And it's like, oh my God, we have to modernize quickly. We are not in good shape for the geopolitical risks that we face.
I wasn't worried until I heard about sewing the fuses. Now I'm very worried.
There was an Italian restaurant in Washington where they have these people at the front, you make the noodles when you go to Italy and you roll them up, and everyone's like, oh my God, it's like the Italian restaurant in people are out there making it by hand. This is not good. This might be great for your Italian pasta, but not for your munitions fuses. So anyway, we've got a lot of trouble. We have a lot of problems. We do have some advantages. There's elements of AI that we're in the lead. We have better submarines. We've got some amazing other technology. But I think just in terms of bulk and sheer size and weight, and the Chinese have a lot of disadvantages also, so I don't mean to always act like they're 10 feet tall. But I did ask, we have a podcast at Beacon Global Strategies. All of you should listen up. It's called NatSec Matters, and the guy I interviewed yesterday is a former Navy intel officer, and I said, well, come on, I don't want to act like the Chinese are 8 or 10 feet tall. And he said, you know what, they're 8 feet tall. And we're not. We're about 6 feet tall right now, so we have a ways to go.
It's a really good podcast. I strongly recommend you listen to it.
We need the listeners. Yeah. We need the dudes. Yeah. So.
Okay, so I sort of opened this up with the idea of like we're after lunch and maybe in this intermezzo phase. I feel like we've gotten a lot of bad news.
This is always how it is.
What do you got in good news?
All right, what I have in good news.
Take us home here. Like, what have we got to be excited about?
So we work for a big bank, and the way that CEO always ends her conversations, which we subscribe to as well, and as down as we usually are, because most people, and this is a great thing about our country. We're constantly auditing ourselves, constantly figuring out how do we improve. We're still the #1 destination for investment in the world. We still have the best investment climate. We have some problem with our schools, but we're still churning out very capable people. For all the problems in our university system, we're still the envy of the world. Most people still want to come to us. We have among the highest degrees of freedom anywhere else in the world. We have a great country, and we've pulled ourselves together in the face of other challenges also. So I don't want to be total Debbie Downer here on where we stand, but a lot of people our attitude is a little bit, we're in Washington just going to events all the time, talking about all the catastrophic things that could happen. And that's part of the process, because you have to influence the decision makers to talk about it back home and get their constituents interested in these types of issues so that they'll support what we think is ultimately necessary and create the conditions for improvement for the country, especially in our security and economic zone, so that we can continue to prosper. So I don't think we're going to lose out to the Chinese. I mean, they were catching us up on GDP, and then they have their own population problems and immigration. I mean, for all of the things we talk about in immigration, nobody but the Wall Street Journal talks about how this is helping us solve a lot of our demographic issues. The Chinese have profound demographic issues. That's another variable, by the way, for people saying, when are they going to invade Taiwan? Do they do it now? Because their relative power may decrease economically, which means militarily in the medium term. So we still got a lot going for us. So
okay,
thanks for giving me the opportunity not to be, totally depressing and downtrodden.
Yeah,
but I'm trying to keep you awake. I'm trying,
I love it.